Good day. Now, I've got no magical answers here, but Doug Coleman and I got talking one day, because he's a director on my board, CMC Metals. And we got talking about the challenges of raising money and in these times, which they are. And he said, Kevin, will you talk about that at the Discoveries Conference this year? And I said, I don't know, Doug, I don't know. And he said, yeah, I really want you to talk about it. And I said, okay. And then I got thinking about what I was going to say today, and frankly, I had a hard time figuring this one out. But I've got no magical answers, but I got a few tips that I've used over the last 5 years to raise some money. And everybody in this room has another thing that works for them, and we should all exchange ideas on how to raise money in these difficult times. Because for small companies, it's a really hard time raising money out there right now. We're not all the Vizsla Silvers of the world and those who are raising huge sums of money. And there's a whole bunch of us that are small companies, and we got to try our best. So here we are. This is not working, guys. Oh, down. Okay. All right. So the kind of companies I'm talking about are companies that are pretty small. Market cap, less than 20 million. Typically have few staff. Might only have one. Might only have 3 or 4. There's not very many people in the office. They have low overheads, small office spaces. Sometimes they even operate virtually. They don't really have an office. They have a name on the door in Vancouver. And until they make discovery, their plays are high-risk, high-reward plays. And that's a tough sell to investors when you want somebody to write a check for $250,000. So it's very tough to raise money through private placements in these days and ages. So what can you do? Well, the first thing, if you are doing a financing, you tell everybody you know that you're doing a financing. And so I'm going to cheat today, and I'm going to tell you that I'm doing my own financing right now. I'm trying to raise $500,000. I'm trying to do a 3.5 cent raise of non-flow-through and 4 cent of flow-through. I'm valued at 12 cents. I'm trading at around 4. I have a good volume, a good trading volume. I typically trade more than 500,000 shares a day, and people like to see that, because that's their exit at the end of the day. And we've got about 148 million shares out, thereabouts. So we're going to close this on or before June the 13th. And we explore for high-grade silver, lead, zinc, CRD deposits in Canada. Now, we're going to get on with the presentation. And anybody wants to hear about the pitch afterwards, come see me, because I got to raise this money in the next month. So the first thing is, when I went in, I was working as an exploration manager once, and I went into my boss's office in Toronto. And on his desk was a whole bunch of business cards. And he was the president of the company. And I was looking at his desk and saying, what the heck you got all those business cards for? And it never occurred to me until I looked at my own desk the other day, and I got piles of business cards across my desk. And that's my network. And the network is most important when you're trying to raise financing. You need to know a lot of people. You need to know people with money. You need to know people who will tell people who have money about you. You need a very large network. The bigger the network, the better you got going. So get to know a lot of people. Now, when you're engaging your audiences, you better be catchy, because otherwise, halfway through the presentation, they're just going to leave. So my last one in Vancouver, I actually did. There's this show. I'm having a brain fart here. It's Dragon's Den, And Dragon's Den, you know, people get up and do the pitch and they're on TV. Well, I did a Dragon's Den in Vancouver about my company. And everybody remembered it at the end of the day. They came up, oh, you're the guy who did the Dragon's Den presentation. So be catchy, be creative. Guanajuato Silver, they were at the same conference, and he got up and he gave away a couple silver coins at the end of the presentation, but he made everybody clap and listen to the presentation and to get that silver coin. So he was creative too, in his own way, and people remembered him. So be creative, be catchy, do something different, and be enthusiastic about your project. Because if you're not enthusiastic about your project, your investors are not going to be interested. So, and too much detail is not good. You want to keep the messages simple. Now, this is way too much information, but here we go. Keep a good news flow. Find an excuse to put out a press release. Keep them informed. Also, you got to be on Twitter, and you need to run videos and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't need to cost a lot of money. It can be cheap. You can find ways. Have a well-organized website. Right now, my website is guilty of not being as organized as I would like it to be. I just haven't had the time to get at it. But it will get back to being very organized one of these days. I send a monthly newsletter out to everybody who subscribes to our website. So I can just simply tell my website provider, send this newsletter out to everybody, and out it goes, and they all get that newsletter every month. And I write it myself. It's cheap. I don't have anybody to write it for me. I write it myself. Then you want to be honest. You want to be honest, and you always want to demonstrate integrity and professionalism in whatever you do. And finally, information does not always need to be about the company. You might tell them something interesting about the silver market or something else that they never knew. But then they remember, oh, that guy was telling me about that. That's interesting. So have a company vision. This was Vizsla has a vision. This was Heliostar's vision. Have a vision of what your company should be or what you want it to be. People want to know that you have a vision for your company. Now, history is often important too. I thought this was really catchy on Reina Silver's. They had these stacks of silver, 25 kilogram silver bars, and you can't see them, but 1 month's production in 1906 equated to 350,000 ounces of fine silver in 25 kilogram bars. And they were talking about the Batapilas mining district in Mexico. I thought that was really neat. So history is often important in projects, and it's very important to the investors that they understand where things came from in the first place. Now, the other thing is, we all have a target. We call them porphyries, or we call them CRDs, we call them this, we call them that. But you need to know what the target is. Simply put, explain the target simply. In this case, it's a silver lead zinc mine in BC, and they're right next door to my property, and they're one of the highest grade underground silver lead zinc mines in the world. I just found another excuse to tell you why you should invest in my company. Now, location, location, location. Well, this was something from Reina Silver, and they said the best place to find a mine is in the shadow of a head frame. Well, my project also happens to be in the shadow of the mine that we just saw. We're less than 1 kilometer away from it. So again, I've just given you another excuse to invest in my company. Now, you can use creative visuals as well, because this is kind of catchy. And you can also use this in community relations activities. So it's not only for investor relations. Now, in this case here, this was Vizsla trying to portray that their property is about the size of Manhattan, New York. Now, if you're trying to explain that to a First Nations group in Yukon, I wouldn't recommend that you explain it using Manhattan because they won't have a clue what you're talking about. But there you go. But this is pretty catchy for a lot of high-level investors who've been to Manhattan, New York, and they understand how big it is. So I thought this was pretty neat. Now, if you're talking to First Nations relations, I was thinking, for example, a drill hole, a 350-meter drill hole. Well, if you've ever been to Toronto, the first level of the CN Tower is 353 meters. Well, so if people from Toronto know it, they can relate to that. But again, would you use that for First Nations relations? No, because a lot of them have never been to Toronto in their life. So maybe you got to put a drawing of a house or something like that, or stack how many houses are in 350 meters, and they'll finally get the concept of how deep that hole really does go at the end of the day. So you can do that. Here's another one that Raina Silver, she was here last year, and she gave a presentation, and she talked about CRDs being like a public transportation system. And I thought that was a really neat talk, and I never forgot this explanation. People like to also know that you are part of a district play. If you are a part of a district play, tell them you're a part of a district play. We are in the Rancheria Silver District. It's an emerging silver district in BC and Yukon. Now, cartoons. Well, these are good, and thanks to my geologist Cesar here for this one. He put together this cartoon of what he thinks our zones look like in sort of a little image. And these kind of provide a little bit of, the geology is there, but people see, it's angled down and this and that, and it's the here and it's there, and these are where the zones are. Okay, yeah, I kind of get it. So, it's a nice little thing. Use cartoons. They're very useful. If you have data, you can use comparables to express how your grades are equivalent or better than others in the industry as well, or where you sort of stand in the big scheme of things. We were third from the left, and Silvertip, which is the mine right next to our property in BC, has one of the highest silver lead zinc grades in the world. And here's the proof of it. So we're chasing very high grade material where we are, and this chart simply shows about 15 projects, many of which have a lot lesser grades than what we're pursuing. People like photos too. Investors like photos. They like to see pictures of your site. Give them a picture of your site. This is our site in Silver Heart, Yukon. And we used it to show the extent of some vein systems and what it looked like from the air. And people have all these fancy things too, but small companies like ours can't often pay for the videos that fly in the mills or fly over sites. But if you happen to be a good drone operator, you sure can use that to create a video of your own as well. And there was actually a Newfoundland company recently that used drones to fly over forestry roads to show how the forestry roads were starting to be built into their property and how accessible they were. So it's kind of really neat. You can do these things I had a geo once that could fly the drone and all that, and he did a lot of good work. So if you got somebody like that, use them. Well, it's another photo of a site, but again, it's just, people are interested. Now, I'm glad to see that this Discoveries Conference has rocks. Yes, right in the middle of the floor out there, people got rocks. And people want to see rocks. We're in the business of rocks. rocks with minerals in them. Now, this was one chunk of rock that sure grabbed a lot of attention at our booth at PDAC or VRAC or all those things. It was a big chunk of galena, and people used to come along and grab big crystals off, but it got them to your booth. It gave you a chance to then talk to them because they're 2 feet away looking at your rock. So then you can start a conversation about, how your company is and what you did and where you found this on your property and all that kind of stuff. So rocks are good. And here's another rock, and you got the grades and, this is an area we're going to explore yet. Another reason you should invest in this project with a 200 foot of 20.7 ounces a ton silver, 5% lead, and about 7.5% zinc. I think that's kind of a nice project myself. And we're going to get around to exploring it. It's in BC. So we're going to start working on that this year as well. Another reason why you should invest in CMC Metals. Now, finally, investors want to know about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. It's the sexy thing in the last couple of years. It was kind of around before. It was called corporate social responsibility. That's another buzzword at the time. So the consultants, they like to change things up and say we're ESG experts and all that kind of stuff or whatever. But you should have an ESG policy. Because an investor might look at you and say, well, what is your ESG policy? Do you have one? We want to invest in a company that we know is being responsible. And so if you don't have it, that's a negative on the tick in the room at the time. Finally, investors want to understand your financial position and capital structure. This is always a question. How much cash do you have on? How many shares do you have out? What's your market cap? How much do you trade? Who are your shareholders? Do you have analyst coverage? On and on. These questions, you need a key fact sheet, something like this. This was a really nice one that I saw, and it had all of this and more. And it was, I think it was Heliostar, and a really nice capital structure chart in their corporate presentation. Now let's talk about money. Now, if you were just asleep, I just woke you up because I just said, now let's talk about money. Okay, so we're going to talk about money. And the few people caught on to, they've tried different things. Charles Funk, he did an acceleration of his warrants to raise some money. Now, he's a bit bigger than us, but we looked at it. We decided we couldn't do it, but we did look at it as an option. Watch what others are offering and see if it applies to your situation and could help you. There's a lot of creativity out there going on in financing right now. And even if it's a big company, you might be able to use that same idea to raise money for you. So do that. Price an offering correctly and fairly because you want to give people a chance to make money. If you have low volumes, there are good people called market makers. I came across this about 2 years ago, and somebody said, you should use a market maker. And I'm saying, what the heck is that? But it's somebody basically that is buying and selling your stock, but they do it in a fair way, and they keep a volume going. And you're paying them a fee, but there are groups out there, I'll name one, Independent Trading Group. He's really good. He's really fair. He doesn't kill your market. A lot of the Vancouver guys, be careful what you get into there. They'll make your market and they'll kill it afterwards because they'll just want to make money. So be careful who you pick as a market maker. Timing is important. The market condition right now is probably a very good time to announce a placement. Let's face it. Silver went up to $32.75 there overnight last night. Gold is up over $2,400. Copper is approaching $5 and was over $5 at one point. What a better time to market. And if you're in Canada, because of our true dope, who's going to introduce a capital gains tax on the 25th of June, we got to get our financings done before June the 25th. So it's a good time to get the financings out of the way, and that's what you're seeing is a lot of private placements right now going on in Canada because they don't want their investors subject to that new capital gains tax. And finally, know and follow the rules of the exchange. It's important that you play the game properly. The other thing about money is people want to know where it's going to go. So we're trying to raise 500 grand, and this is how we're going to spend it. Now, I'll talk to you about that later if you're interested, but basically, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that money, and that's important to know in the room. That will come up all of the time. Finally, how do you expect to generate money for them? They're investing in you because they expect you to make money for them. So you better be able to explain how you are going to make money for them. They want to know that your stock has a good chance of going up. They don't want it to go down because we've all been there and done that, and that's not a good experience. So what activities are potentially going to create value in the foreseeable future? Estimate timelines, provide expected outcomes and goals, and have short and long-term objectives. They will want to hear this stuff. Well, my opportunity, you have to answer at the end of the day, why should they invest in your company? And if you don't have several reasons on why they should invest in you, then you got to think about it more. So you better have your reasons, and you better have good reasons on why they're going to do that, because there's 2,500 other companies trying to chase that same money all of the time. So we're back to where we were. I'm financing. I want you to invest in me. I've given you a number of reasons, and I'll give you more if you talk to me. And I hope all of you, when you go out there, it's really tough right now in this market. You got to be diligent. It's tough. You get a lot of no's. But I can also say, everybody is important. And a lot of these accredited investors, they are very modest people. They will appear modest. They are wealthy. They can write big checks. Never write off anyone, because it might be the one person who writes that big check and invests in your company. So never, ever give up on anybody. I was in Yukon once, worked with the government, and there was this prospector, and he was a modest kind, but he used to hang around a lot, and everybody didn't like him. But you know what? The guy was a genius. He picked out great properties. He did lots of option deals. He was really smart, but everybody else wrote him off. I got to know him pretty good. He was a nice guy. So thank you very much. I hope I passed on some thoughts on how you might be able to improve your probability of getting that money for your project, and I wish you all the best in all of your projects. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.